Discover the heartbeat of Lexington at the Marriott City Center, your premier downtown destination. Let us handle all your meeting needs, whether you're planning a corporate gathering or a special celebration. Our elegant, versatile spaces provide the perfect setting for every moment. Don't forget about our great room bar, a perfect spot to stop in after work or before a game to enjoy handcrafted signature cocktails. You don't need to be a hotel guest. Just relax and unwind. Whether you're gearing up for the game or winding down afterward, Lexington Marriott City Center, your ultimate destination to stay, connect, and celebrate. We've got everything you need to make every moment unforgettable.
The news has shaken the foundation of the UK football program and the greater University of Kentucky athletics community tonight. After 13 seasons, a guy that we love and care about tremendously, along with his football staff as well as office staff. The era comes to an end for Mark Stoops. The Wildcats are closing in now on their replacement in Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein. I believe a 36-year-old Kentucky native, a former Louisville quarterback, and the architect of one of the most explosive offenses in college football. Being reported tonight by a lot of media outlets that Will Stein is coming home to the Bluegrass to take on his first head coaching job. Tonight, we're not just reacting to the headline, we're diving into what this means. We're asking the hard question. We're leaning on you, our listeners, the fans, to ask us some of the hard questions. Is this the visionary hire to modern UK football, or is it a huge gamble on a first-time head coach? What does his philosophy mean for a program that's in desperate need of an identity? And how does a young coach juggle a college football playoff run at Oregon while simultaneously trying to build a roster from an upcoming national signing day, as well as roster retention and prepare for a potential free agent market as well? Tonight, I'm excited to be joined by you guys. Let's go around the room. Morgan Newton, it's good to have you back in the booth again tonight. Appreciate your coverage this season on the LetterWinner pod. Stephen Scaldaferri, Trevard Lindley. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well, man. Appreciate the invite for sure.
How you doing? I'm doing pretty good tonight. I tell you, news like this, for some people, for some of the fans, I get it. There's an excitement, there's an adrenaline rush. But for guys like us, where we've been behind the scenes, we've gotten to know Mark, and we've gotten to know the staff, we've seen the highs and lows. The emotions have just been all over the place. It feels similar, Stephen, to one of these college breakups. There's some aspects of the breakup where you look at it and you're like, man, get an opportunity to move on, a new chapter. But there's so much history there with Mark and so much appreciation for what he's done. How do you start to move forward and get ready to embrace Will Stein, Morgan?
Yeah, I think just to your point, Mark took the program through some years, through a lot of highs, more highs than the program had experienced maybe ever, or at least in a long time.
Yeah.
I think seeing Mark go is the end of the chapter. We saw Calipari go last year. So the last 10 plus years has included John Calipari and Mark Stoops. Not having Stoops, I think it's going to be a little bit strange, but it was time. I don't think anybody wanted to see him leave or wanted to push him out per se, but I think everybody was fine to see us do something a little bit different. And I'm excited about the future, but thankful for Coach Stoops and the time that he served.
Stephen, what was your reaction to the news coming out that the board had decided that they were going to move into a new direction?
At the end of the day, it's the college landscape we live in now, where go to social media, you go anywhere in the world, and people want instant results. And I think when people are looking at Kurt Signetti and other coaches that are coming in and really capitalizing and taking advantage of NIL and other aspects, it looks on the surface like everything can be a quick fix. I would throw a little caution to the wind on that. I don't think every situation is that. But at the same time, if you look over the past 13 years, look at how many schools that were significantly dominant in the SEC have been through 2+ coaches in that time period, and Stoops survived it all. I don't think he just survived. He thrived in it. And there was a stat that just came out, and it was literally a 180-degree flip in longest tenured coach in the SEC. And Kirby Smart's got it now. And he was almost at the bottom 2 years ago as the newest coach. So it's interesting to see the landscape. So shocked, but excited at the same time. So I think we'll never forget Stoops, obviously, for what he brought to the table and shouldered a lot of that throughout the years for us and brought us moments that we will talk about forever. So it's bittersweet.
It is. Trevard, what was your reaction? You've been on the beat. You've been following it this year. You've been a part of a roundtable podcast. What's been some of the sentiments from you and from some of your colleagues?
I guess for me, last year,
thinking he's going to get fired or whatnot, and he didn't. So when it happened this year, like, all right, we'll actually see what happens. If he actually going to get fired or if Mitch or somebody going to pull the string and cut him loose. But it happened, and so he had a lot of good years with him here. He broke a lot of records as far as beating Florida down in Florida, beating Tennessee down in Tennessee, and having a lot of players that he recruited to go get drafted to go to the pros. So he did a lot of good things there, and I guess it's see it this way. So hopefully the new coach come in and get his recruits, get his coaches, and gonna need to get some NIL to actually bring some players there to actually compete with the other teams in SEC.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about some of those accomplishments. You talk about the 2 10-win seasons, which were just fantastic. One of the greatest memories I had just being down there in Orlando in that matchup against Penn State, where Penn State had so many pros on the field. And guess what? So did this Mark Stoops football team. A lot of pros, a lot of legends, guys that are still playing football and are going to play football professionally for a long time, breaking the Florida streak. Morgan, you and I, we've talked about that. That was a huge one. Terry Wilson going down there, Lynn Bowden with some tremendous games down there. So many guys over the years that just made so many plays. And it's just impressive, the amount of talent that Mark and his staff were able to accumulate, the peaks. It was fun. Tremendous memories. I'll never forget being in the press box there before kickoff, in that getting ready for that matchup against Penn State, and the tears started coming down my face. And Christy, Dusty, they look over at me, and in that moment, I realized, like, this is it. Like, this is it. This is what it feels like to have somebody come in and literally inject everything that they can muster from a guy like Mark, who comes from Youngstown, Ohio, his dad a coach, his brother's coaches, just a guy that just loved football, put everything that he had into it, and to see it come together for him in that peak, we won't forget it. I don't think dementia will take these memories away. And if they try to, I'm going to make sure I got those pictures plastered on the walls in whatever nursing home or long-term care facility that my wife tries to throw me in, if that comes for me later down the line. But with that being said, Mark was more than a football coach too. I think being able to see him behind the scenes, being on the board with Coaches for the Kids, seeing how much love that he had for Kentucky Children's Hospital, their mission, their vision, and their values. He raised millions of dollars. He and his staff behind the scenes, Eddie Grand, Josh Pruitt, those guys behind the scenes work relentlessly to raise money and to better the lives of these kids at the hospital. Mark, he was so involved and so engaged, helping bring video game systems into the waiting rooms and places like that over at KCH for these kids. We've seen all the guys over the years that have taken time out of their busy schedules going to the Children's Hospital weekly. He was a guy that leaves a tremendous impact, not only on the field, but in the community. He was also here with 13 years. You think about all of the tragedies that have struck Kentucky, the natural disasters that have struck Kentucky. He, Calipari, those guys, they had their fingerprints all over these things for greater than over the last decade. And these are the kind of things that won't be forgotten. And this will be locked in. That'll be part of Mark's legacy. And I think I just wanted to take the time to just spend a little time talking about that and just his impact. And before we dive in and start talking about the football side, the new direction, potentially this new era with Will Stein. Morgan, where does Will Stein start? Do you think he's had a chance tonight to pick up the phone and reach out to any of the young Wildcats?
Yeah, I suspect that he's started reaching out to folks. As a matter of fact, I've heard that he has made a few reach outs to some key potential returnees. And so I think that's a great start. You're talking about a guy, Will Stein, who's a young guy. I was just thinking, I played against him in 2011. He was on the other side. I don't know if he got hurt or something happened. Then they brought some guy named Bridgewater in and he finished the game. You're talking about a guy who's played the position, young guy, and he's going to be very eager. You can just tell and get a sense he's going to be fired up and eager to coach Kentucky, and he's going to feed the studs. So I'm looking forward to watching him feed the studs.
Just to touch on the surface, Will Stein grew up going to games in Commonwealth Stadium. His parents, UK alum, dad, a letter winner. This place means a lot to him. I don't know if you guys have seen Homeland season 1. Steven, you seen Homeland?
Yeah.
I can't wait to meet him. We may have to pull him in. We may have to waterboard him, make sure he's not planted, make sure that we do our due diligence, but excited to have him. One of the first questions that we got tonight from Janet out of Annapolis, she asked, is he too young? Is 36 too young to be a head coach of an SEC football team as your first head coaching job? Anybody want to take that?
I wouldn't think so.
Because my DC from the Eagles, his first coaching job, I think he was like 39 to 40. So if he can do the NFL, I think somebody can come in and SEC at his age and take it over.
Steve?
My response would be, we're about to find out. We are about to find out. Look, the way you look at things, again, going back to the landscape we live in today, you're connecting with the players. We're rarely connecting with these players for 4 years anymore. You're having to connect with them immediately, and you're lucky if you get 2 years with them. So I think if he comes in here, creates that bond fast, which seems like he's had phenomenal relationships throughout his Oregon tenure, I think it's one of those things where if he can come in and establish that and be a players-led program, get the discipline in there, set the standard with being the first one in and the last one out, I think he can create something that'll really start to cascade through. And I always look at it as, if you're going to have that success at that age, he's probably going to be one of the youngest guys in the SEC. So maybe that's to our advantage. Maybe he's a little bit closer to these players to develop that talent, knowing that reality is not going to be with them nearly what it used to be, where you get guys for 3, 4, 5 years. So I think it could end up being a huge advantage for us.
How important was it to move quickly in this situation? With National Signing Day coming up, like, how do we view that? I kind of have some thoughts around that. I think National Signing Day, it has changed rather quickly in terms of its importance. It's important, especially if you feel like the young players that you're bringing in, if they have quick upside, guys that you feel confident are going to be on the field within 2 seasons. Whereas if you think a guy's a little bit more of a project, then maybe there's different avenues for those kind of players to go. But this all moved really quickly, which leads me to believe that there were probably some diplomatic cables that were being passed behind the scenes pretty quickly. At some point, I'm sure Will Stein and his people probably reached out when they suspected there was going to be a change and let it be known. We know that because that's what Mark did going into this position. I was told that he reached out pretty quickly in the process. He or his agent through some of the back channels to let it be known that they had a plan. I know that it came down, if you believe some of the rumors, it came down potentially to 2 offensive coordinators. You had Will Stein, a guy from Kentucky. He doesn't need an Uber to figure out how to get around Lexington and Louisville. And then you had Brian Hartline, who we have a tremendous respect for, his brother Mike Hartline, who was QB1 here in Lexington and who had a tremendous impact on QB1 Cutter Boley this fall. When you look at the precipitous climb that he made this season, do you think that his location and his relationship with the program and his family, if it did come down to these two, do you think that they dove in and looked at it? How quickly can somebody hit the ground in this scenario and get going? Because the Brian Hartline, it made me wonder with Brian, Ohio's obviously a football-rich place, but Ohio State and Michigan, both of their programs they're tracking really well. How big of an impact could he have had here if you're not able to get in and beat Ohio State and Michigan for players in Ohio?
Yeah, based on some things that I've heard from just people around the university, people that are around, the search itself was very focused on quickly getting them in. If you have any hope of picking up high school recruits in this particular cycle, it was going to be important to get somebody in that seat and named rather quickly, turn that around pretty quickly. There have been some discussions around JUCO players. There's always going to be discussions around transfers and transfer portal type players. But the focus, based on what I've heard and the information I've received, is it was going to be primarily about personnel and getting the personnel in place, at least some of the key personnel in place rather quickly. Also, the alignment to the campus side of the university. Clearly, we had to find $37 million to escort Stoops out of the door. And there were some inner workings and some things happening in the background there, from what I understand. A lot of rumors being floated around where that money's coming from. I don't think this hire was so much based on focus on the football. And maybe they got a little fortunate that you've got 2 guys that have a good reputation for at least offensive football. I think it was mostly about timing and personnel. That was a big part of this decision and getting it done fast.
Steve, any thoughts on that?
I think if you look at the buckets that they needed to solve here, right? If you narrowed in and you really felt early on, this is the guy, unless someone can really convince us otherwise, you got 3 buckets, right? Kentucky's about to get national attention immediately when Oregon goes to the playoff. Any kid that was considering Kentucky, they're watching the Oregon game. Any kid that was not offered yet by Oregon, but had a chance to get offered by Oregon, is now on high alert of Kentucky. Any transfers that were on the radar that may not go are also going to be hearing about Kentucky the whole time. So this is phenomenal opportunity. Kentucky's going to get incredible national exposure on those games. While it may be a little bit, I don't want to say detrimental for him to be there longer and them to make a deep run, it's just going to be a little bit of Kentucky on repeat. It'll be about Oregon. But I think the other bucket that's out there is, remember, there's a transfer portal. How many Oregon guys are not playing right now that are on that roster that went there to play for him that are now going, wait a minute now, I could also go there. So I think there's a lot of avenues there that could be huge. I think the other piece is by getting him in early, there's a lot of movement in college football right now. There's a tremendous amount of really top talent coaches out there that are looking for homes. And now you have the opportunity to backfill with some of those. And you're seeing a ton of movement. Look how much happened Sunday. And we're only sitting here on Monday. And now more guys are going and more guys are going. So how does he capitalize on that? And I think that's going to probably be the largest focus is he's got to have guys here in Lexington within a week starting that process while he's continuing to coach. So that's the part for me that is I'm a little bit on high alert for.
Steven, bro, I'm like yesterday, I was hearing a lot of things about some potential movement in Louisville because there's some different jobs that his name had been floated around. And I'll be honest with you, when I heard about the movement, what was going on at Louisville potentially, I was like, if Kentucky doesn't move fast, there's a possibility that the guy that, was going to be sought after by our university would now have that as an option for him as something that's available. So I do think operating with a level of urgency was crucial because to your point, I don't think it's done yet. The Penn State job still got to get filled. And that's a big time national job.
Yes, it is. Morgan, we talk about it on the pod. When you talk about some of the teams who've made quick jumps, the IUs, the Vandys, these guys, they had a little bit of Louis they brought with them. Do you think that it's possible that Will Stein, that he comes with a quarterback to come in and potentially compete next fall against Cutter, potentially some other players that could come?
Not only is it possible, I say it's likely. You've got to have multiple guys that are capable of taking snaps in this league. We've seen that year after year. Stein, the offense that he runs is going to attract elite quarterbacks. Part of having an offensive-minded coach, a guy that's had success. I think I saw something that his last maybe 3 quarterbacks are playing in the NFL, right? Young quarterbacks are going to want to play for that guy. And I think that's the type of guy you want to lead your offense. Yes, I'd say that's a certainty. I spent some time watching some Oregon tape today. The studs that he talks about feeding, they have a plethora in Eugene, a plethora. That big, pretty tight end they've got. If Kentucky starts picking up players like that and he's bringing and attracting those types of players, you can turn things around, at least offensively, rather quickly. Now, there's a lot of other things that have to be figured out, but I assume offensive skill personnel, he's going to be able to attract them.
Corey Peters just stopped in, UK Hall of Fame defensive tackle Corey Peters, scout for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Corey, how are you this evening?
I'm doing good, man. How y'all doing?
Hey, doing well, man. No complaints on our end. Obviously, you've seen the news. I know that you got a lot to share. We had you on the pod earlier this season. You had thoughts on potentially the right move would be going and getting an offensive-minded person, somebody that could potentially relate to young players. Talk about the Will Stein hire and how do you think that this could impact the Kentucky football program?
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think Mark Stoops did an excellent job with these last few years, and then down the stretch here, the Vandy game, the Louisville game, I think just totally unacceptable. I can understand the move. I'm excited about the future. Having an offensive head coach, somebody that we know can put up points, is going to be instrumental just because I think Kentucky is probably not the easiest place to recruit, especially when you consider the conference and the competition that you're going up against. You need somebody that can bring a little bit of an edge, somebody that can change the math from a scheme standpoint, because I'm not sure that Kentucky is the place where you're going to be out recruiting these teams head to head. Just to have somebody that, from my estimation, can change the math and provide some schematic advantages, I think that's going to be huge as far as getting us off on the right track and hopefully getting this thing turned around.
Corey, I got a question for you. When you think about Oregon in the broader scope of these last few years with Stein offensively, one of the things I always think about is you bring in some of these hotshot offensive coordinators. What does that do to the image of your team? What type of team can you have? Can you be tough enough? Can you be physical enough? From being a coach out at Oregon to now you're coming in the SEC and you know what it's like in the trenches in the SEC. What's your perspective on that? Do you think Will Stein can adjust from being in the Big Ten to now being in the SEC and having to play the type of schedule that Kentucky's got to play?
He's going to have to. And I think you're seeing similar style coaches come in and implement what they want to run. But as far as the O-line and D-line is concerned, there's a certain style that you have to play in the SEC. And I think back to when we were in school and Urban Meyer took over at Florida, and they were running kind of a spread system. But in the trenches, there was still a lot of heavy doubles and powers. And so the backfield action was jet sweeps and all this kind of stuff designed to confuse you. But when you break it down up front, they had a physical group that was trying to move guys off the ball. And one thing that I did like under Coach Stoops was for a while there, we had an offensive line that was able to move guys. And really, we were a heavy run team at times where we were running the ball against guys when they knew we were going to run. I like to see that continue as far as fostering those relationships, getting the right guys in the room, and continuing to try to push to be a physical and dominant group up front. And I think that goes a long way to be successful. You put a lot on the plate of these quarterbacks, but you can only really add so much. And I think the best way to help a quarterback is to have a strong run game that you can go off of. And then that's going to provide some play action opportunities as well as some opportunities to be in short yardage situations where everything is not 3rd and 7 or 3rd and long. You got the majority of your third downs in the game in 3rd and 2 or less. And I think that gives us an opportunity to maintain possession and ultimately be successful. Like I said, I'm super excited about it. I caught the tail end of you guys' conversation about being able to recruit offensive skill positions, and I think that's going to be excellent. Obviously, I'm really excited about Cutter and his continued development, but competition is going to be great for everybody. And that's the name of the game in football. Nobody should be comfortable. Everybody has to be challenged. And that's the case for the coaching staff. That's the coach for the roster from top to bottom. That's just what football is. Being able to bring in as much competition, that's only going to provide the best product on the field.
Corey, you got a different perspective on all this. We always have to be careful the kind of questions we ask because of your line of work, but we know that you'll answer it in a way that you can. What the hell happened at the end of the Stoops regime with the ball that was being played while we couldn't win games? Vince leaves last year. Like when you watch the Kentucky tape or you watch Kentucky, like what happened? What changed in your viewpoint with what you saw?
Yeah, I think down the stretch, I would have to question where the culture is. Obviously, I feel like we had a little bit of a mass exodus last year with the transfer portal. A lot of guys seemed like they left and headed out. But down the stretch, the way we lost to Louisville, the way the Vandy game ended up, to me, that screams a culture issue. The fight just didn't seem to be there to me. And so whenever you lose to your in-state rival 41-0, and I know Louisville's a good team, but they're not 41-0 good. I think that was totally unacceptable. And when you put out a performance like that in a game where you know how this rivalry is, you come out and win that game, and the question
He's still coaching here.
It's still a question.
Still
for
coaching here.
Like I said, I think it has to be a culture thing. And I'm not there. I don't know what goes on inside the building. This is just what I'm watching from the game from home. It is what it is. I think that when you are head coach at one of these SEC programs, you know the type of environment. It is a situation where you got to win. You got to put a good product on the field. Otherwise, just like I was just talking about, they're going to find somebody else to replace you. And that's no different for anybody else on the team.
How risky is it, Corey, to go and bring in an offensive coordinator to come in and try to sort through the environment right now in the Kentucky football facility versus going and getting an established person? We saw names like Dan Mullen, who we know is a proven winner.
I'm open-minded when it comes to the coaching search. I think you got to give these guys time. I've been around lots of position coaches that I've thought would make excellent head coaches, guys that probably would never get an opportunity for whatever reason. There are a lot of cerebral things that go into being a good head coach, being able to have relationships with all different types of people, to be able to understand how to connect with different people from different backgrounds, to understand what this person needs, what that person needs, and what moment to push what buttons. I don't know that there's an exact answer for who can and who can't do that. And I'm a little bit more reserved, give guys time. I think experience matters. The people that you've coached with, coming from Oregon, working under Coach Lanning, who I've been impressed with just from watching clips of him in the locker room addressing the team, and then their record on the field, the product they put on the field. I think all these coaches draw from those experiences working under different people and put it together and wait for their opportunity to be in charge and say, okay, I like this part of what this guy did and this part of what that guy did. I didn't so much like this, so we're not going to include that. So it's just a matter of making a plan and being able to execute said plan. And I think one of the more underrated parts of it is the staff that he fills out with him. And as you guys know, when you're on a team as a defensive lineman, I spent more time with the D-line coach and the head coach or the coordinator for saying, I feel like that's incredibly important. They probably spend more time with these college players than anybody, especially in the offseason and the rules involved with how much contact you can have with these guys on the field. And so I think the staff that he hires, the guys that he brings with him, is going to be just as important as the head coach hire. Like I said, I think the foundation is there. Kentucky has everything that you need to be successful. Them making a decision to move on from Mark Stoops, the financial implications of that, to me, it says that this is a program that is ready to take the next step. But saying, okay, this is not good enough, this is unacceptable. We're going out and we're trying to win. And so I think that is a positive sign for me, because in order to entice these coaching candidates, and I haven't dug into contracts or whatever, but in order to entice these candidates, you have to commit to giving these guys the resources to be able to compete in the best league in the country. I'm excited to kind of see what that looks like, to see how far they're willing to go as far as the NIL landscape now. From what I can tell, the facilities are A1, and like I said, I travel the country and I'm always in different
You're in and out.
facilities. So
Yep.
Kentucky's facilities are as good as any I've seen. They're not lacking for anything as far as, okay, can a player come here and actually develop into an NFL player? The answer to that is absolutely yes. So
What about the snacks, CP? Have you been in any of them that's got better snacks than others?
most places don't allow us in the cafeteria. They keep us out of those spaces, but they're really nice, man. I'm telling you, it's amazing to me, the resources around the country at the different levels as well, just that people are putting into their football programs. And it's really good for our young people, because honestly, this day and age, you could really go anywhere. And if you have the right mindset, you can develop yourself into a profession.
One of the things I was thinking about, and I'm interested in everybody's opinion on this, Mark's legacy, right? I think personally, and I choose my words wisely, I think in the Mark Stoops era, there were a ton of highs, the highest of the highs in Kentucky's football history. Or at least,
Crazy high.
and then you look at the 2018 roster, y'all should go and look at that 2018 roster. It's littered with pros, 15
Littered.
of them probably. But he also has a 47% win percentage. What is his legacy? What's everybody's perspective or opinion on the Mark Stoops legacy as you think over 13 years? I'm curious. Trevor, what do you think?
I think his legacy is good. He came in with a slow start, and eventually he got rolling when he got it. Players and recruits he wanted, but his legacy is still strong. Like I said earlier, he beat Tennessee there, beat Florida there. He got a lot of kids drafted in the first round and throughout the whole draft, so I think his legacy is still pretty high.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
So-
CP.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I look at it as a positive legacy. I'm very grateful for what he's done for the program. I think the voices and the noise that you hear from the fan base here at the end is kind of a reflection of that. He raised the standard. The expectation rose. Maybe in years past, they would have let these last 2 years slide. But at this point, it's just not good enough. That's in part because of the highs that he was able to carry the program to. When you look at it as a whole, it'll be a positive legacy. I still got a lot of respect for him. I think he's a great coach. And I think he'll get other opportunities and end up being successful somewhere else as well. The way these last few weeks have gone, it was time for a change.
Steve, you and I, we've talked about it, how hands-on Mark was in those early years and how he was actively working with the defensive backs. And it was no surprise that unit, that group between Mark and also once they got Steve Clinkscale, who was an incredible defensive backs coach. I mean, we had a stretch there with Kentucky under Brad White, this defense, that they were the number one pass defense in the SEC, one of the top pass defenses in college football. The secondary was littered with pros, safeties, corners, slot. So at peak Mark Stoops football, you saw him out there. I saw him out there working with Beatty, working with Street, working with these guys early on. And for Mark, that's where he seemed like he was at peace the most. And as he turned over and became more of a head coach, he started to step away and let some of the other coaches grow, give them an opportunity to build these relationships, turn these guys into the experts. He was able to replace some of these guys, bring in a guy like Chris Collins, who has seemed to be an amazing coach there, coaching the guys on the outside. John Sumrall at the linebacker coach position, not able to replace John Slarman, probably not able to replace Steve Clinkscale, because you got to remember he coached the safeties as well. Those are tremendous coaches that he lost. And I know that there's guys that, that I'm forgetting along the way. You guys can fill in the gaps. So I just think some of that attrition there is what caught up to Mark. I don't know if we'll ever see a head coach survive 7 offensive coordinator changes and you didn't win a national championship ever again. I mean, that just goes to show the impact that they had with special teams, but also with this Brad White defense. So let's talk about Brad White. Where is his legacy at? A guy who, we've all talked about it, probably was not as involved with choosing his personnel as he would like to have been, I think he's a phenomenal football coach. Does Will Stein look to keep Brad White on, knowing that Brad had limitations as a defensive coordinator? Or do you look to see Brad test the waters and potentially go get a head coach job or even a defensive coordinator position somewhere in the SEC? Because I'd like to think he's going to be highly sought after. He's a brilliant football mind.
I'll give my perspective on it. Just going back to the age thing. If Stein is the guy, he will be by 5 years the youngest coach in the SEC. And the 4 youngest coaches in the SEC are the 4 new hires. So think about the trend that we're seeing. We got Golish, Levy, and Stein are the last hires. And not far behind them is Silverfield, Lee, and Summerall. So you're seeing the whole entire kind of new regime. We just happen to get the youngest by 5 years. So, I mean, it was an interesting stat to look at. But on the Brad White thing, I'm a huge Brad White fan. On the Stoops comment, though, just one comment, Jeremy, on that, because I think it's important, is that it's tough when you're constantly bringing in new staff, from my perspective, to stay in the weeds hands-on, because you've probably sold them on, you can come in, this is your position, and you're in that mode where I don't want to overstep. You still hear the noise. Oh, Stoops is holding the offense back, so I'm going to stay out of the offense. But then he gets criticized because he's not hands-on. And then he's got Brad White there, and you're constantly shuffling some of those defensive staff members where it's, if I go in there and start to coach the DBs, I've just brought Collins in to do that. Am I overstepping? Who's the player? So I think he's in a tough spot there at times with so much turnover. When you look at Saban and all those guys, like, they had some of that, a little bit of continuity where they did that in the beginning and they never stopped. And I think as he moved back a little bit and let those guys get in, I think it was a little bit troubling, but I think Brad White is going to be a defensive coordinator in the SEC next year. I am hopeful personally that it's at Kentucky, because I think he could rebuild some of the staff and refresh some things, get a little bit more on the recruiting side to support Stein from that perspective. But I'm fearful of the Gators and I'm fearful of LSU. That's just my opinion, but I'm fearful that those are big opportunities. And you see some of the coaching shifts and moves that's happening, and LSU's defensive coordinator getting an interview, and does that leave an opening? And it's a great opportunity, and what he could do with that talent. So I would hope he would stick around. I think his legacy wise, man, think about the games where we score 10 points and yet we're all sitting there with 3 minutes left going, we might be able to win. And that's the defense. And it's always been the backbone, which again goes back to Corey's comment on what the hell happened the last 2 weeks. That is a meltdown. And so you got to pause there. Obviously, coaching and players got to play, coaches got to coach, but I think he's an extremely talented coach that's going to be a defensive coordinator next season in the SEC.
When a team score a lot of points, you just got to look at the cornerbacks and say, what's going on? That's what I would do with Trevard. Trevard, what's going on out there in space? Come on, man. You got to stay on that jam for 10 seconds. I don't care who this guy is. What's his name? Julio? I don't care. Jam him up. What did you see down the backstretch? We had a lot of injuries in that secondary, and we found ourselves going up against some really good offensive-minded coaches and offensive coordinators. At Vandy, Tim Beck, he's second in the SEC in scoring average. We know Tennessee with their offense, what they're capable of. But what did you see in the secondary over the last few weeks that may have been troubling to you?
I felt like Vandy and Louisville, you got beat 2 different ways in my view. Vandy's a really good football team. And,
excellent.
And one of the things, because I had a chance to talk to a few players about the Vandy game, they feel like that staff recruits to a specific position type very well. Tons of length, great personnel on the defensive side of the ball, and they just have exquisite execution, like an elite executing team. That was the perspective that I've heard from many of the Kentucky people I'm connected with. And they just out-executed, out-schemed. It was just a complete and total beatdown. Louisville, on the other side, I hear the term quit. I don't really like that term. I think it's a little bit of a tough term to use with competitors, but it felt like it was going to be a lot more difficult to capture the momentum in that game. They never really seemed like they had any momentum. And when the block punt happened, it just seemed like it was a downward spiral from there. And then, of course, we go for it backed up. And that was forfeiture in its own right. Those last 2 games were really rough, but I think they beat us a couple of different ways from my viewpoint.
We got a question from someone in the chat asking, is there some concern that if we were to lose Brad White, could he potentially take some people with him? Some of these corners, a guy like Chris Collins, Anwar Stewart, the defensive line coach, Ricky Lumpkin with the UK Sports Network, he's been very adamant that the way that the defensive line has played this year, he feels like it's the best defensive line since 2018. He thought Anwar Stewart had the defensive line playing with their helmets on fire. And when you turn on the film, it was a group that was working extremely hard. So it does make you start to wonder that if you lose Brad White, strong relationships with Anwar and Chris, do you worry about losing some of your beef that you got?
I would say so. If Brad White and Anwar are pretty good friends, you might go with them. And if the players have a good relationship with their coach, might talk them into going, or the player just might love the coach that much, they just follow him wherever he goes. In my opinion.
I think that, yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the things that's so hard to translate sometimes to the fans, how special the relationship is between the position coach and the player. When you have coaches that start to leave and go other places, especially if you've had significant growth as a player under the direction of someone, it's hard to stay back not knowing if that quality of coaching is going to be the same or better. So you have to take those things into consideration as well. See, if you've transferred, you've had experience with that. You've been extremely successful at both places. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think so. My answer to the first question is I think Stein's going to be a key linchpin in that. Is he coming in very aggressive and saying, this is my defensive staff? Then I think that's a whole different avenue that maybe Stu or Collins or all them, or is he coming in going, man, I got a UK guy here in Stu. I got to protect that. And that's going to be my first conversation. I want you here. Collins is co-defensive coordinator, if I'm not mistaken. Is that an opportunity? We don't know what Stein has yet. That's the big wild card here is what staff does he have versus is he coming in, just like we're going to question, does he believe Boley's the right guy for his system? Boley could be amazing, but is he the system guy I need to have an immediate impact? Most likely, yes, but we'll find out. Same concept on the defensive side. Does he already have this preconceived? Maybe he thinks Brad White is one of the top defensive coordinators in the country, and that's his strong interest to go, all I got to do is bring the offense. Let Brad do his thing. If he wants to make changes, that's on Brad. We don't know. And I think that's the big unknown on the Brad White thing is what is Stein's thoughts on that? From a transfer perspective, yeah, look, it's going to be really interesting because I think even when you look at I've seen some of the tweets on some of the quarterbacks we're recruiting, right? And it's like waiting and all of a sudden you see him post a picture with Stein. He's recruiting him in Oregon too. That bond's already there. So that's huge now. And it's, wait a minute, I got the best of both worlds. Maybe we can do this here. So I think that bond, you cannot disregard it. But at the same time, I do think it could be a little bit different at some of the positions when you're talking about if it's, let's throw names out there. If it's a Florida, if it's an LSU and you're going there, what's your confidence level that, hey, I might want to wait a little bit and see who's coming in as defensive coordinator because I got a job where, right or wrong, there's 3 or 4 or 5 stars there. And I was a 3 that's outperforming. So I think it's going to be an interesting juggle there. And it's not really neutral from that perspective. But there could be 1 or 2 guys that are playing above their means that can go get more exposure immediately at one of the other schools.
I think we can see a tremendous overhaul with this roster. We've had a lot of conversation behind the scenes, just talking about how we thought at the end of last year that the roster was low on legends. I'm pretty sure that after this year, once we know who's leaving, who's graduating, we can look at this roster and we can probably feel pretty similar to the same way. We had to be pretty aggressive going out into the portal to replace some of these deficiencies. We have not seen a lot of young players on this roster step into regular roles on either side of the ball. Even on the offensive side, we saw the younger players really step in and start to be a factor later in the season, specifically with the wide receivers and DJ and Cam Miller there. I think that this is a tall task for the next head coach. Coming in, watching film, trying to see how much SEC talent we have. I won't put Corey in this position because I know he's paid to evaluate the talent and he may be too honest and we don't want to get him in trouble. But from an NFL talent perspective, when we have our pro day, feel pretty confident that that group's not going to have a lot of talent like the 18, the 21 teams, some of those teams in between had. It's not there. And it's definitely not there from some of the underclassmen. We can see massive overhaul of this roster in the next 2 seasons.
There's a couple of things I think at play here. Number one, they swung and missed on many of the transfer portal guys that they invested a bunch of money in, allegedly, on this particular team. I'm thinking about guys like Stiletto. I'm thinking about guys like Calzada. Clearly guys like the tackles, they didn't stop a speed rush all year. Guys like Ferrier, guys, you go down the list. There's a bunch of guys on that team that they just swung and missed on. And then they spent a bunch of money. So resource allocation going forward and how they manage the portal, that's going to be huge. They've got to get that part right. And that part hasn't been a strength stat. And it's hard to get pros when you don't pick up the right guys. And I think that's part of the reason why you could see wholesale changes from a staff perspective too, right? I like Anwar. I like Brad White and some of these guys, but Brad White's been playing guys 10 yards off track since he's come here. Maybe he wants to get up in guys' face, and maybe he wants to press a little more, but maybe mix in some man, maybe have a little bit of a different type of athlete that's playing DB. I'd welcome it. I'm tired of us giving up pitches into the boundary. I suspect that Stein's going to evaluate that. Steve, like you said, probably has some people he's coached with, whether it be at Oregon or at UTSA, that he aligns to that'll be defensive philosophy.
Man, just going down and just looking through it, I thought it was a lot this year. I think 55 to 57 new players, and that's a lot. And you talk about the need for resource allocation. We go back and we listen to Mitch Barnhart in the weeks and the months coming after the formation of the Champions Blue. He made it clear that UK wasn't going to come out and put specific allocation percentages on sports. They were going to leave some of these things open to be fluid with the numbers. I would expect there to be a heavy allocation of the rev share towards football to help Coach Stein and his staff with the initial rebuild, and then look to potentially balance it out. So when you look at this basketball roster, you and I, we talk about this $22 million roster, allegedly, that could potentially or allegedly be front-loaded this year to make sure that Mark Pope has what he needs to be successful for a 2-year period. If that's the case, then this could put Will Stein and his coaching staff in a position with heavy resource allocation from rev share and also some NIL dollars. If you start baking some cookies, those type of things, raise revenue, get enough people doing these kind of things, I think that's what is going to put Kentucky football in the position to be successful, give it the best chance to climb out of this talent deficit that it's in, because it's tremendous. The talent deficit is tremendous. The younger players on this team, this is not to be disrespectful. They have a lot of work to do this offseason to grow into SEC players, role players. There's a lot of work to be done there.
You've got to re-recruit. Firstly, you got to re-recruit the team that's there if you decide that those are the guys that you want. That's going to be a big part of this process. At this point, I think the Kentucky fan base has got to come to peace with every guy on this roster could leave.
Yeah, that's not crazy.
Every single one. You could have an entire new roster in the next year. Now, I don't think that's probably going to happen. It's unlikely, but it is possible. And in today's climate, you've got to expect that you're going to lose north of 50% of these players. So that is very likely to happen. I think it's also a pretty common thought that identifying how to pay players, whether it's NIL, eventually rev share, the university ain't been great at it on either side, basketball or football. They just haven't. They have not been great at it.
Morgan, double click on your comment. Think about it in two different sectors. Do offense and then do defense. You got a new offensive guy coming in. Aren't those offensive guys going, whoa, I want to be here for this. This is going to be exciting. I got an opportunity. Or are they going, oh, he's just going to go portal and I'm going to be an afterthought because he's going to bring all his own guys in. So put yourself in their shoes, offense versus defense.
Look, I can tell you Cutter's already thinking that. And so if Cutter's thinking that, everybody's got to think. I don't know if there's a resource coming back that, is viewed as a more critical piece to keep as part of this process than Cutter. And he's thinking it. So everybody's got to think it on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, in my view, and we've got some defensive players that are on this live stream, it's so scheme specific as the type of guy and the type of body that you're going to want to play in a 3-4, 4-3, zone defense, nickel, so on and so forth, right? I don't even know until you identify who that person is. Jeremy, we've talked about it on past pods. We don't know if the scheme and the bodies are going to fit, right? Like, we don't know if they're going to fit the scheme. So it's hard to identify that at this point in time.
Especially, and Corey, if you can talk on that, when you start talking about defensive ends and you start trying to switch from a 4-3 to a 3-4, you got these hybrid, these outside linebacker type bodies, and the scheme changes. You got some guys that are potentially some tweeners. So if you're a new head coach coming in and you know that, I really don't like 3-4, I want to run 4-3, or I want to, for some reason, I want to run a 4-2-5. Like, how do you come in as a first-time head coach and make these decisions of how you want to marry a new defensive coordinator to your offensive philosophy?
Yeah, I think for me, I would take the approach that, okay, I'm getting hired in a new spot. I got some security here for the first few years. Obviously, with the new guys I'm recruiting and the guys that I'm bringing in, the guys I'm trying to retain, I would focus more on the guys that fit what I wanted to do. But this first year especially, it's probably going to have to be some hybrid of what we were and what I want to be, and sort of transition over the course of time, as opposed to just trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole. So if you got good players that you like to utilize, but maybe they don't exactly fit what it is that I want to do, I think the best coordinators and just the best coaches in general find a way to create a system that it's a little bit of what I want, but it's also putting you in a position where you can do things that I'm asking you to do. And so let the process of getting the defense to what I want it to be a 2-3 year process. Now, the good thing with the landscape of college football and the transfer portal is you can see these rebuilds happen pretty quickly, bringing guys in. But I always think about Florida State. The year they were undefeated, they had Jared Verse and Braden Fitz, and they really did a good job and hit on a lot of those transfer portal guys. And then they come back the next year and take the same approach, and it's a complete failure. That's what you get with the portal, that with a lot of other programs that are heavy portal programs. And I think it's going to be a wild variation of the results. If you build a program with consistent, heavy transfer portal, I think the transfer portal is best used for, okay, I got my foundation set. All right, we need to go find a receiver to complement what we're doing, or we need to go and find a cornerback that can do this or provide that, and then pick and choose who you want, as opposed to having to build a whole roster from that portal. Because let's be real, it's a little bit like free agency in the NFL. Certain guys are just never going to hit free agency. The team that they're on is just not going to allow. This player is such a good player that whatever we got to do to keep him, we're going to do that. And I feel that same way about the transfer portal. Certain players just never going to hit the portal. And so I always look at the guys in the portal, okay, what's the drawback here? Why are you leaving your school? In some situations, it's a clear answer. Okay, it's a better opportunity, a money situation, whatever. Sometimes that answer is very clear, but at other times it's not so clear. And I'm supposed to think that a receiver or somebody in the portal that couldn't get on the field at their school currently is supposed to be the savior for my program. I'm always a little bit cautious with that kind of thought process. The transfer portal is always, it's an interesting thing, and I think you never really know what you got until you got it. I know that Kentucky's going to give them the resources to get that done, but I think that first step is always going to be for them to evaluate the roster, figure out which guys they like to retain, and even if those guys don't necessarily fit what it is they want to do exactly, at least until they can buy some time to get everything exactly how you want it.
Corey, if you were a GM for UK football, that's not out of the possibility. I don't know what kind of notes you might be passing, who DMs you might be sliding in, but if you were to be a GM, how would you attempt to utilize the resources from NIL or rev share to manage a roster? Mark made it clear with one of his last coaching shows that they were leaning more towards a model where they wanted to use the revenue to retain proven players and potentially get away from a model of using it to entice players into your program. Because unlikely to be earned bonuses, there aren't incentives in place. It's basically you go get a guy or you don't.
Yeah, I tend to agree with it. I think if I'm looking at it from all things equal, and I'm being honest with myself, some of the teams that we're competing against, if we were to come up in a recruiting battle, I'm not sure that's a battle that we want to fight all the time. So I think Morgan said something about Vandy being extremely high execution. I think we got to build a cultural program that understands that maybe we're not going to get the top 5 recruiting class in the country, but the guys that we get have to be tough, have to be competitive, have to be all of those intangible things that make football players great. Those are non-negotiable. We have to have guys that care about football a lot, guys that want to put their best foot forward and do their best just because they want to be the best and no other reason. And so the guys that we get at Kentucky are probably not going to be guys that's saying, I'm going to go and get the most money that I can get. Or they're going to have more depth to them than that. And that's not to say, hey, I don't want to get paid. Now, you definitely got to pay. Don't get it twisted. But the entirety of the package has to be more intriguing than just the number as far as what you're getting monetarily. And so I would focus on building through high school. And then, like I said a little bit ago, just bringing in a position here, a position there, but focus an incredible amount of resources on the development, just getting these kids early. I think about my recruitment, Kentucky offered me really early in high school. And ultimately, if I had to narrow down to one reason why I chose to go to Kentucky, that was it. A lot of it was relationship-based, and I had a lot of time to build those relationships. And I think that's the best way to build a sustainable program. And then once you get your culture, it's a snowball effect. And the younger players coming in, they're able to watch the older players and see what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And as they continue to grow in the program, I think the results start to improve exponentially. You've got to have a strategy like that at a place like Kentucky, where just historically you're not going to match up. The Lane Kiffin situation is evident because in my estimation, you can do anything at Ole Miss that you can do at LSU. But perception is, it is what it is, and we both, I don't blame nobody for that. People got to do what's best for them. But I'm just saying that's just how it is. When you're competing with people that have history on their side, you have to be innovative, you have to be aggressive. Most importantly, you have less room for error. So the guys that you do bring in, you got to be right about them, and they got to work out for you.
The success that they're having at Ole Miss, Corey, Kentucky can have that level of success with the right coach. I saw Eli Manning play in person down in Oxford as a high school player. Their environment is not even close to the environment of Kroger Field. I've seen some stuff coming out this week where there's a lot of current SEC players that talk about how underrated that Kroger Field nighttime environment is, especially that October, that Keeneland, that motivated Kentucky football fan base in the month of October. And I don't think that the success that they're having in Oxford, that it's not attainable in Lexington. And I think that's what we're chasing. Everybody knows we played down there. We played in Baton Rouge. We know what that's like.
Yeah.
That's an incredible atmosphere, an incredible venue. And ultimately, it looks like their organization made it clear from a rev share and NIL perspective, and also his salary, that they were going to be able to put together a package that there was no way Ole Miss would be able to match and sustain. They're two different programs, Ole Miss and LSU. And anybody that doesn't get that and understand that, then, we need to sit you down in a room with somebody else where they can explain the differences between those places. But with that being said, we're biased being Kentucky fans. When we go back and we look at the Mark Stoops contract, the goal was laid out in the contract. The goal of, here's the auto escalator, here's the cash bonus at the 7 win, at the 8 win, at the 9 win. So the expectation is that you're going to win 7 games a year at UK. And then you're going to have some years where you win 8, 9, and 10. And Mark did that for a good stretch. I don't think that's any different. Stephen, Corey, is that still the goal? Is that still the plan? 7 win minimum every year with the opportunity to, every few years, do something special. Go do a January or New Year Day bowl game or a playoff run. Because the 18 and the 21 team, they would have been right on the brink of playoffs in this new era. The 18-21 spread out by 3 seasons. Would we be happy with that as football letter winners of this program?
Yeah, I would. I think that 8 wins for Kentucky on a down year, I would love to see that as the program grows. I think more than anything, it's about the way the game looks, the product that we're putting on the field. I would think that's what got Coach Stoops. The Louisville game was unacceptable. And maybe you lose those games, but the fight wasn't there. It just didn't look the way it should look. But I think that's what Kentucky's kind of ceiling is, to get to a point where 8 wins is a down year and then jump up there and make the playoffs. I think it's possible. I think the resources are there for them to compete at that level. Anybody that goes to Kentucky and actually experiences it, I think will be pleased and excited about the atmosphere and everything that it has to offer. I made so much money when I was playing in the NFL betting on Kentucky games with other guys in the locker room just because their perception of the name Kentucky was not good. And certain games, I said, let's bet on this game, my school versus your school. And their thought process is, there's no way Kentucky's going to beat Auburn, or there's no way Kentucky's going to beat whoever. And so I was able to take advantage of that just because that's what I feel like a lot of people, especially people that come from Southeastern Conference states, feel about Kentucky. But anybody that spends time there, goes there, takes a game, any player that takes a visit there, I think will come away with an appreciation for everything that Kentucky has to offer. And I think the program deserves to be in a place where, what you just described, see us as a team that compete for one of those at-large playoff spots. You get the right quarterback in place and get the culture to a point where guys are supporting each other, and no matter who's in, injuries, all of that next man up mentality, everything is designed as this is the standard. Whoever's in is required to uphold that standard. And once you get that rolling, it feeds itself, and then we can continue to build off of it.
Not to be confused with, we still need Wi-Fi upgraded in the stadium, and we need some other enhancements.
Yeah, Florida, good luck.
We need a hot wing event in there too. We'll make sure we'll get that list. We'll give them a short list of some upgrades, some things like that can really take it up a notch. What you throwing on the list?
I would be pleased to see a real general manager. I know I don't want to overestimate or overstate the Wi-Fi upgrades.
A bidet would be nice too.
The lights has been great. The light changes, I guess that does it for some people. I want to see a general manager that supporters, donors trust is handling their money. That's what I want to see.
Agreed.
Go ahead, handling the money. What you talking about, the cash, or you talking about just like in general?
I'm talking about, I want to see us get a general manager properly distributes the resources. And I hope that Will Stein has a plan for that, right? I hope there's a real plan and a strategy for that going forward, because there's a lot of rumors about, a lot of people just make blanket statements about NIL, and it requires NIL in today's day and age. If you can't have NIL concerns and want to ask people to pony up, and the resources aren't going to the right place. So that's my request.
It's a shame we don't have any former players that are GMs in the NFL or anything right now.
How could you expect someone that hasn't done it on a professional level to be able to come in and do it on this level?
You can't. It's a new position. So you're not going to find anybody in college.
I think it's going to just take the innovative and creative mind, and don't be afraid to take a chance. Kentucky's a unique opportunity. It's a unique space. We will benefit from being bold. I'm not sure how they're structured now. I haven't really looked at that, but getting a good GM in place and somebody that can evaluate talent and also be able to see past the obvious. I talk to a lot of coaches when I'm out on the road about the guys that they recruit. Everybody describes what they're looking for as the same thing. And it's the same thing we're looking for as NFL scouts. And everybody wants the long, pretty guy. Morgan had mentioned the tight end at Oregon, who is a pretty guy. So everybody wants that. But I think the sweet spot at Kentucky is being able to identify the guys that other people might look over a little bit. I look at that quarterback at Vandy, who a lot of people would say got no business playing quarterback in the SEC, but he's super exciting to watch. And I don't know, I haven't really evaluated, but he's probably one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Corey, bro, I watched him with my own two eyes for the first time in person, Vandy, a week and a half ago. He can play. Pavia can flat out play. There's a lot of antics around him. There's people afraid of Manziel. Like, they think he might be more Manziel than he is Baker Mayfield per se, but he was efficient. He was completing balls down the field. That dude can flat out play.
Absolutely.
Flat out play.
I think my favorite thing about him is when that moment comes, he doesn't shy away from it. He attacks the moment, and when the game gets tough, he steps up to the challenge. And that mental part of it and the intangible part of it is, in a lot of ways, it's just as important or more important than the actual talent. Guys are born, and you can develop talent to a certain extent, but you got what you got. That mentality is something that can really carry you.
Anytime you bring in a new coordinator, like I remember in Washington, going from the 4-3 to the 3-4, they bring Jim Haslett in, and at that moment they did that. I was an undersized defensive end in that system. They were asking me, they were retrofitting me to get ready to lose a few pounds. They started tacking on some of them fines. Being a pound and a half overweight, found myself having to get in that sauna. I bring that up to say, I don't think anybody's safe. And I think that's one of the things that everybody on this roster that they have to be careful about. That would be how I would caution even Cutter Boley. As much as I love him, I love the Boley family, his body of work, everything that they've done, all the way down to Ty Bryant, who I love, hometown guy, defensive back, leading the SEC in interceptions, that when decisions like this are being made, you can't assume that your spot is safe just because of your body of work that you did last season. It's a new regime. Will Stein gets one chance to be the head coach of the University of Kentucky for the first time and ever. And with that, he's got to put himself and his coaches and his staff in the best position to be successful. These guys are going to go through every single snap that these boys have put on film. They're going to go through every record that they can get a hold of. They're going to find out who's been accountable. They're going to see how much they know. They're going to ask the tough questions. He's going to turn over all the rocks. So that would be my warning to these guys. Newt, I haven't had a chance to watch Oregon as much as I would like. I know that the offense over the last few years has been really good. I'm not going to put you on the spot to talk about Will Stein and his offense out there, but I've seen enough to know that there's some nuances between what he does there and what Bush Hamdan asked him to do here. You're still the quarterback. You're still throwing the football, but can you talk a little bit on what it's like for a quarterback to find yourself in a position where you're potentially changing a scheme year over year with a new coordinator?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what y'all think. Based on what I saw this year, it was very up and down with Bush and the offense. There were times where there was some life. It started out really rocky. I think they caught a little bit of fire towards the middle of the year. And then there were times from what I could see that offensively we were just underprepared. I just thought that schematically we got into some scenarios where it was just a mismatch. One of the first things we do in offensive preparation is we establish what our zero checks are, our zero blitz checks. What are we going to do when a team decides they want to zero out against us, meaning man-to-man across the board and bring pressure? What are our answers going to be? Our answers with Bush this year were inadequate. Didn't have answers. Didn't have good enough answers. Caught us in a lot of scenarios where we didn't have a solution to zero blitz. Same thing in some cases with third down, specifically third and long. Didn't have, in my opinion, a good enough third and long plan for a young quarterback to have success. I think when you look at somebody like Will Stein, I think this is one of the benefits of potentially bringing in an offensive guy. You expect us to have more answers to the situations that you're going to experience in the game. And I've seen a little bit of some of the things that Will has done at Oregon. I've watched him from afar. It's a different league. The Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever number pack, before they came over to the Big Ten, those are two different leagues. Will's going to have to adjust from the Big Ten to the SEC. It's a different league. He's going to have answers to the defensive coordinators in this league. They're going to do everything in their power to make life miserable for you, specifically on third down.
As far as corners and whatnot, we always tell everybody on defense, alert's going to drop. It'll be pretty crazy for just to throw it deep and hope their receiver catches, but some teams do that and get successful, some don't. Usually third down for us, we just third and long, alert's going to drop.
Just going through some of the comments, really appreciate a lot of people, a lot of night owls. If we wasn't in here doing this breaking news, man, I would have been in REM 2.5 hours ago. Probably would have had a couple scoops of cherry cordial ice cream. I'd be dreaming about who knows what. Definitely appreciate you all jumping in and spending a little bit of time with us. What are we forgetting? I feel like there's an elephant in the room, something we hadn't addressed. I'm trying to go through the comments here, make sure that we haven't missed something significant.
We hadn't talked about the athletic administration. We may not want to talk about that, though. We might want to leave that one alone.
Man, Kroger Field is a vacation destination for me, man. You got to live there. I got a vacation there. I like to keep all those relationships intact. I love them guys, men and women over there. We might be able to talk a little bit on it new.
Wi-Fi and chicken wings?
Huh?
Wi-Fi and chicken wings?
We let them off easy. There's been a lot of talk about the contract that Stoops got. People, all these lawyers talking about how the contract this and the contract that, Cowell's contract, and now the Stoops contract bailed us out. And I know Jimmy Sexton. I was a Jimmy Sexton guy. And his job is to get good contracts for his clients. I don't think it's a zero-sum game of got one over on you. Jimmy has great relationships with the University of Kentucky. When he came to Lexington for my pro day, as well as other guys' pro days, he's got good long-standing relationships. Now, he doesn't care about Lexington the way he does now, but he cares about the relationships and the people that he's worked with for decades. We aren't privy as fans and alumnus to know what the handshake agreements are with some of these contracts and why some of these stipulations stay in. And that stipulation could have been a hard line for a plethora of reasons that may not have had anything to do with Mark Stoops. It could have had something to do with the way that contracts or way the previous coaches and experiences that Jimmy Sexton was privy to that no one else was. At the end of the day, I didn't expect that full buyout was going to have to happen like that. I just think that was a protective clause that was put in place. And at the end of the day, Mark Stoops, he cares about this place. He cares about this program and the people. He knows that our athletic department, we don't have a war chest like Texas A&M. And I don't think that there was a situation where he was going to truly try to force the hand and be paid out that full amount in 60 days. I really don't. I think it's a nothing burger, personally, to be honest. I really do. That's my piece on the contract side of it. I know that these are tough decisions that have to be made. One of the things from an administrative perspective, I read the room, Eli Capilouto getting his piece out in support of Mitch Barnhart and the board today as well. It seems like everybody that needs to be rowing the boat, everybody's got a paddle. If they ain't got a paddle, then they ain't got a lot of weight to them, so they're not holding the boat down. But I'm encouraged that the decisions that are being made, that they're being made with everybody at the table. You and I, we've had a lot of conversations about this on last week's pod. We went through the board and who we thought everybody was that was on the board, the voting members, the non-voting members. I think they put together a really good board, knowing that we got a guy like Jacob Tammy, one of our brothers, on that board representing UK, That gives us a lot of peace because we know how much UK football and University of Kentucky in general means to Jacob and also these other people. But once again, we don't have the war chest that some of these other places have. We've talked about it ad nauseum. You have to be good stewards of the resources. You have to have faith that the coaches that you're bringing in, that they're going to bring in a competent staff. We know that there's a little bit of cronyism and with coaching that goes along with it. You know, I don't expect it to be like University of Louisville where you got 4 Brahms on the staff, but I do expect there to be strong relationships, people that Will Stein can trust and that he wants to keep close to him, because that's an important part of coaching that I don't think any of us probably get because we haven't coached and been in that war room at that level. But the administration's job at this point is just to make sure that they give Will Stein and staff what they're asking for up front. So my advice to Will Stein would be come in prepared, like how Mark Stoops did. Mark Stoops came in 13 years ago prepared. He knew and he asked for what he needed and what he wanted to be successful. Don't come in and not ask and demand what you need up front, because you know as well as I do, once you get in here, it's so easy once you get in 2-3 years down the line to look back and say, hey man, it'd been nice if we could have knocked that wall out and done this. Brother, get on the ground with an architectural engineer, a spiritual advisor, and whatever else you need, an interior designer. Walk the premises, talk to current players, talk with former players, make sure that you know everything that you need up front. Get it like how Garrett saw Calzada get it. Be clear with it. Run them papers, run them bands, staple, bound, deliver it, FedEx it, email it, do all of those things. Will do that. I think that he's savvy, and I think that he's going to have people around him that are probably telling him exactly that.
Yeah.
Get it up front.
Jeremy, I'm not going to lie, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. One of the concerns I have with the age, and there's some really smart people that are young, and so I don't want to even spend too much time on the age, but I'll even maybe say one of the concerns I have with, let's just say he just hasn't been in the industry all that long, is can you handle the type of tenured university administration from a negotiation perspective, from a getting the resource you want perspective? Because there's some people up there in the ranks of administration have been doing this a long time, and they've been doing it in times that are completely different than they are today. And my experience being on the periphery is a lot of times it's been the squeaky wheel effect, the squeaky wheel scenario where you got to go ask for additional support. So if I'm being honest, that's my concern for Will Stein. Is do you understand what you're getting yourself into with the administration? They're very supportive. I'm not saying they're not supportive. I'm not saying that they're not going to step up and support and help you and give you all the resources they feel like you need. But are you prepared when times get tough to say, hey, I need a little extra help in these areas because it's a rapidly evolving environment and it may not be the same in 2 years that it is today. Steve, what do you think about that?
I think you're spot on. You also have a head coach coming in that's most likely going to be calling plays, which takes up even more time than just being a head coach and having 2 coordinators. The largest fear is when you get the response, just how it is here, are you seasoned enough to say, not anymore, this is how it is here now? Or is it, okay, yep, you got it. I need this. Yeah, go out and raise more NIL. That ain't my job. No, and this goes back to Jarman's point, right? You better walk it. You better walk it in the morning. You better walk it in the dark. You better walk it when the lights are bright. And it's going to be all those things that, let's pause. Where's he coming from? He's coming from a blank check with 3x the number of staff and anything in the planet they would want at Oregon. So you got to think of all the conversations that were had that Lanning was in, that he wasn't. They can be thick as thieves and tight as can be. But all those meetings that Lanning was in that he wasn't, how did he learn that? And we cannot afford to be that. Maybe we won't be. Maybe we'll be fine. But I think there's a lot of things, to your point, that are set in their ways a little bit. And again, we go back to the facilities thing. How long ago were the facilities built? What did they say when they opened it? And we know this is the beginning. We're only going to be the best SEC facility, which we were at the time, for about another 24 hours. And then somebody else is going to do something more.
Yep.
And what have we realistically done to that facility different? We did the indoor. I'm all for that. But when you look at it, it's like, How are we going to continue to go? And we're going to have a new track and field center. I'm all for that because we are becoming some of the best out there. But the money's not all going to football. And there's not endless amounts of money. And that's the biggest piece is how is he going to react in those situations?
Look at the comment to Steve Hellier, a guy that we know very well, a guy that understands Oregon. Give me Rich Brooks' phone. I promise you I can find them points where he and Stein possibly have found time to grab a cup of coffee. Why wouldn't you? It'd be a lunatic not to. Stein, despite being young, you don't get to where he is without being savvy, having people in your corner to make sure that you're reaching out to some of your predecessors to know exactly what you're walking into, because the administration, they have their own KPIs. They have their own budgets and those things. They have to be good stewards of the resources. And the coaches, they have their own thoughts and ideas on how they want to build a Taj Mahal and have all the bells and whistles to make, to Stephen's point, to make the facility even better. But how much of that is really necessary? And those are conversations that need to be hashed out and negotiated behind the scenes. So there's a lot of work up ahead from a perspective of coaching and administration getting into the room together to start to talk particulars. And some of those things may not happen before the contracts get signed. The major things will, but some of those things, they will just have to be negotiated out.
And I, for one, am excited to see what he brings from Oregon culturally.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Like 100 uniform combinations. Is that what you mean?
Relationships. And if that can impact the Kentucky culture, Kentucky's had a Nike deal for a long time now. If that can impact the culture, if that can impact the type of players that we can procure in the transfer portal, as Randall Burden is alluding to, then yeah, I want to see what types of cultural changes happen and what he's going to bring to the university. Because Stoops, to your point, when he came on board, the standard changed. Not going to get into my opinions on why the standard changed or how it changed and why did it change then and so on and so forth. But it changed for better or for worse. So what will be those changes this time around with Stein coming in, and what types of things that he shares part of his interview that he wants, and how will those things show up?
I think we'll get a really quick glimpse of it by the first couple staff hires. Are they other young guys that he's come up through the ranks with? Is it this seasoned vet somewhere that he knows and has always given him trouble on defense? And no, I want that guy to be my defensive coordinator one day when I'm a head coach, and all these pieces. So I think we're going to start to slowly see it trickle. And then the big thing is, we don't see a lot where we're located. We don't see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff of Oregon, right? We see a lot of the SEC stuff. And all of a sudden you've seen Lanning lately pretty intense in the locker room and other pieces. And I don't know him well enough to know, is that something that's manifested its way into Stein's mentality? Or he seems, everybody says that when you talk to all these people that are in the know, he's calm, very schematic, very these things, but there's a little bit of that Lanning come out in him and he gets a little fiery, which I would not be opposed to at all.
I'm cracking up over some of these comments that I can't put on the stream, but there's some people out here that they say, hey, you got to get it in writing, or you might have to come back and get it in blood. Hey, Anthony White, UK legendary running back, hopefully one day UK Hall of Fame running back. He asked if Mark Hill is on deck for, I think, Morgan and a lot of us, we've had that conversation. It's been tremendous watching the elevation of Mark Hill from strength coach to deputy. I think it's deputy AD. I don't yell at me for getting his title switched up, but he's a guy that cares about this place tremendously. He knows a lot of people. He's very well respected on campus. So I would definitely expect him to be on any short list if and when that time may come in the future. It would not surprise me one bit to see him take over. I just think, once again, we've talked about it extensively, Morgan. You just got to make sure that you put people in the room when you're making these decisions. Third-party consultants, that you got a good board, a good diverse board who have a lot of experience in different industries that can provide anecdotes and stories for how policy changes, how financial crunches, all of these things, because this is a new deal. We talked about, there's no manual for this new NIL era. And right now, when you look at it, there's a lot of expenses to be a part of this new era of college sports. You had to opt in. It was a pay for play for the universities to be able to be a part of this new system. Now you're paying Mark Stoops like a Roman general who's basically been taken from the battlefield, and you're sending him off into his estate for the rest of his life. So once again, you have to be great stewards of the resources.
Yeah,
it's important.
And more than likely,
important.
A new president in the near future. That's another level.
Did you say a new president or new athletic director?
I would think both are going to be in the future, in the shorter rather than longer term.
Yeah, I was watching Twitter today. I guess it's X now. I was watching X today to see who all got their obligatory thank you, Coach Stoops, the future of the program, X messages out there. I just wanted to see who had something to say, who was thankful.
Hey, there's some shots fired today on social media too. Some real distracting stuff. 2:00 in the afternoon. What's going on?
Crazy 2 days. Shout out to Anthony White, legend. I know you already said that, Jeremy, but I'm glad he's listening. Respect to the legend, the UK legend that I think's been watching a little bit. Shout out to him. We always want to pay homage to the folks that have come before us. Shout out to him, legend.
Shout out Tom Kalinowski, Trevino Woods, bringing that to our attention that even with potentially a new bump up in Nike gear, TK still only giving them boys one pair of gloves. My guy Ashton Cobb checking in, both near future. I can't decode that one.
Maybe he's talking about AD and president. I'm going to decipher it. He's saying they're both near the future.
But yeah.
Yeah, man. Now, this was fun. Just a lot to unpack. Uncharted territory for our administration. I wish our Champions Blue Board nothing but well wishes and just high hopes because they're making tremendous decisions that are going to impact the financial health of not only the university, but the athletic program into the foreseeable future. These are significant investments that are being made by our university to outfit a winning football program, as well as all the other programs. But we all know in order to be competitive in the SEC from a football perspective, the resources that it takes to be competitive. There's a little bit of luck that goes into it, but man, these are difficult decisions that I wouldn't want to have to be making. But it's not something you raise your hand and say, yeah, I'd like to be a part of making decisions that could ultimately bankrupt an entity I care tremendously about. And I don't think that's an over-exaggeration. A lot of these SEC schools and schools in general, they're playing a very dangerous game. And at the end of the day, the most important piece is to get in a coach that's going to bring in a competent, qualified staff that's going to pour into these kids, that's going to help get these guys engaged with the community. That's the name of the game. How can you get these guys engaged into the community where they want to be here? You shared last week how you had 20 places to go on Thanksgiving. Now, you probably stopped at 5 or 6 once that belly got full, but I know exactly what you meant. This is a community that cares about Kentucky people, Kentucky letter winners. And they want to see UK football and all the sports be successful. I think everybody plays a part in just making sure that, especially letter winners, that we share these stories. We share the impact that organizations like the K Club and what this means to us, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the fraternity, the sorority aspect of being former players, now letter winners, supporting our programs. And that's what this is about. We're not here to break stories. We're not here to say egregious things to get engagement. This is purely about opening up, giving the fan base an opportunity to engage with us, to ask questions, to share thoughts, ideas, and allow us to have a space to pour back into a community that's given us so much. It's given us everything. Place that we care tremendously about and that we want to succeed at all costs. These are perilous times in college athletics. And I'm hopeful that our group, our team, our administrators, our president, our future president, all these people, our fan base, that we get what we deserve. We're due an SEC championship. We're due one in the modern era. And I'm hopeful that Coach Stein and his future staff, that they're going to be the ones that are going to usher in this new era of Kentucky football. There's no doubt in my mind that his family, that they're going to bring energy and excitement to this that Mark Stoops brought 13 years ago, if not more. He's young. We're going to need that youth. He's going to need that youth to connect with this group. These kids, they're different. They are. They're different. It's different times. And I'm ecstatic for him. I'm ecstatic for his future staff, the current players. I can't imagine the emotions right now. And I feel my heart pours out to the current players on this staff for what they're experiencing right now with the termination of Mark Stoops. I don't even want to try to empathize how sick some of these guys are because we saw the efforts that these guys made down the stretch. We talked about it. We talked about how they probably needed to have a November unlike any that the program had ever seen. We talked about, could they rattle off 5 straight? At a minimum, could they rattle off four out of the last 5? If they would have got 4 out of the last 5, we wouldn't be having this session tonight. We would not be having this session. These players, they put their heart into this. They trusted Mark and his staff, and they gave it everything they had to keep Mark Stoops employed, to beat the University of Louisville, to beat Vanderbilt, and they just came up short. And this feeling, these emotions, this is going to be something that they take with them for the rest of their life. And I know that because I know what it felt like to hear, Trevard, I know you did, when our staff, when Rich Brooks and the staff that we played for, when they were on the hot seat. As a redshirt freshman, I started to feel some of that pressure, understanding Mike Archer made it very clear to me as a young player what was at stake. Saw the stress a little bit behind the scenes with some of the staff. And these guys came up short, and my heart breaks for them. Now they have to figure it out, what's next for them. And I wish these guys nothing but luck, love, and all the best wishes in the world, because some of these players, their lives are going to be changed and they're going to be altered. Mark's brought hundreds of players into this program. He's impacted hundreds of families positively. That's his legacy. Staff, players, NFL players, guys who feel like without Mark Stoops that their experience returning to Lexington will forever be altered. And in some ways they're right, but they're going to come out stronger and they're going to come out better for it. Full steam behind Coach Stein and his staff and this new day for Kentucky football. I'm fired up for it. You guys want to close out with any thoughts?
Ready to get this new era started, see what he can do, what kind of players he can bring. I'm assuming he may or may not be Jewish. I don't know. Stein's a very Jewish last name. Man Mishpoka. Welcome to Big Blue Nation, my friend.
Welcome back to
you
Big Blue
bilingual,
Nation.
dude.
Welcome back.
You speak fluent, is it Yiddish?
Certainly not fluent, but I've grown up around and family with. We'll figure that out.
Hey guys, appreciate you. Appreciate my brothers. Appreciate you guys for taking your time, jumping, pouring into the fans, sharing your thoughts, your excitement, your energy as UK football prepares for a new day.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you all.
Yeah, man.